Spider-Man. We all know him, we all love him. Unless you live under a rock, you know that Peter Parker was just your average teenager until he was bitten by a radioactive spider, which gave him these like crazy powers, like super strength. Then he saw this robber dude and was like, that's not my problem. But guess what? It is his problem, because this guy went and killed his Uncle Ben. And Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. And after that, I mean, really get into it. Peter starts to... Okay. We all know Peter Parker, and as of the past 10 or so years, we also know that he's not the one and only Spider-Man. In the comics, there have been other Spider-Men and Spider-Women for a while now. I mean, Miguel O'Hara first appeared in Marvel Comics in 1992. Over the years, we've had games like Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions introduce the main populace to other alternate heroes, but these other spiders didn't really become part of the public conscious until one pretty monumental film. Obviously, I'm talking about Into the Spider-Verse, the successful animated film that introduced a whole new generation of people to Miles Morales, who himself was a pretty new character, first appearing only 7 years prior in Ultimate Comics Fallout issue number 4. See, Miles is a little different than Peter. Although he was also bitten by a radioactive spider, after that, he... Alright, you get it. Another spider, another origin, another story, blah blah blah. Anyway, the main thing the Spider-Verse movies really introduce is not just another Spider-Man, but the reveal that there are an infinite amount of Spider people out there. I mean, look, we have Ghost Spider, Spider-Noir, Spider-Punk, Spider-Dad, Angsty Spider, Spider with Mech, Cartoon Spider, Metro Boomin' Spider, Lego Spiders... You get the gist. Funny enough, even though the movie showcases so many different Spider people, it never shows us one of my personal favorites. If you read the title of this video, you already know who I'm talking about. A man by the name of Takuya Yamashiro. Better known as Japanese Spider-Man. Yeah! Wow! Yeah! Wow! So, you might be asking yourself, is that the Toei-produced tokusatsu Japanese Spider-Man show from the late 70s? Now, if you did ask yourself that question, I'm assuming you look like this guy. But yeah, Japanese Spider-Man does have a bit of a cult following, especially in the broader Japanese tokusatsu and Sentai communities, and plenty of clips from the show have circulated online for decades now. By the way, yes, that is Spider-Man calling a ship that turns into a mech. Don't get ahead of yourself. We'll get to it when we get to it. For those of you who don't understand what the hell a tokusatsu is, and why Spider-Man is piloting a giant mech, let me break it down for you by starting at the beginning. Spider-Man. Our story begins in the early 1970s in Japan.
Actually, it is pronounced Nihon.
Sorry about that.
So get used to saying that instead of Japan. Because that is very disrespectful to the honorable people of Nihon.
I did not want to be disrespectful.
Not very sugai.
Thank you, Sephiroth-sama. So our story begins in the early 70s in the land of the rising sun, with a man by the name of Gene Pelc. Now, Gene was just your typical American guy from the early 70s. His first job was as a disc jockey at Wall Radio in New York City. Pretty groovy, Gene. Around this period, he met his wife, a Eurasian girl named Mary Angela Eastley, whose parents lived in Japan. Anyway, from then on, Gene found himself constantly traveling between the US and Japan. Gene quickly fell in love with the country and set out to find a way to make a living there. As a big American comics fan, he found himself reading a lot of Japanese manga on his travels. As he looked into it, he found out that the Japanese comics industry was huge and even had broader demographics than the American comics industry, which mostly appealed to young men. While there, he tried to get his hands on some American comics, but when he asked around, he noticed there wasn't a single American comic to be found. Armed with this information, Gene smelled opportunity. He flew straight back to New York and decided to call the biggest people in American comics, Marvel. Somehow, he managed to convince the people at Marvel Comics to set up a meeting between himself and Stan Lee. Gene said to him, "You know, Stan, your comics are everywhere, but in Japan, you don't even exist. You're nothing out there." Stan Lee explained to Gene that Marvel had tried to expand to Japan before, but the Japanese just weren't interested in buying American comics. Now, Gene was on his way back to Japan as an official Marvel representative, with a stamp of approval from the biggest man in comics to try and make deals to bring Marvel and its colorful cast of characters to the Japanese market. One of his first big deals was with Shueisha to put a Spider-Man comic in one of their best-selling magazines. That magazine? Japanese Playboy, which in total fairness did result in a lot of sticky pages, but not for our number one Spider. At this point, Gene was running out of options. He had quit his job and moved his family to Tokyo. He had to succeed. Gene Pelc needed a hero. A superhero. Out of the corner of his eye, Gene noticed his son and his friends watching a couple popular Japanese shows called Gorenger and Kamen Rider. These were Gene's first look into the world of Japanese tokusatsu. Now, tokusatsu is specifically a Japanese word that refers to live-action films or TV that make heavy use of practical special effects. If you're coming from a more Western viewpoint, think Godzilla or Power Rangers. Many might already know about the almighty Kamen Rider, king of superhero tokusatsu, but may be unfamiliar with Himitsu Sentai Gorenger. Gorenger was an early attempt at a Sentai tokusatsu. Sentai specifically meaning squadron in reference to a show about a superhero team. Now, Gorenger was popular, but its poor sequel quickly reduced the newly formed Sentai genre to ash. Anyway, Gene realized that this was how he could get Marvel into the Japanese conscious. He just needed to find a company who could help him produce a hit show using Marvel characters. This brought Gene to make a deal with Toei, the pioneers of the tokusatsu genre in Japan. In the deal, Toei would license out some of its characters to Marvel, and in exchange, Marvel would license some of its characters to Toei. Now, before the show entered production, Marvel execs stressed that this show would never see the light of day outside of Japan, meaning that Gene was given the green light to do whatever he needed to make sure Marvel made a profit. Because of this, Gene and the team at Toei had a lot more creative freedom, resulting in a show that feels like Spider-Man, while at the same time being a completely different story. This show wouldn't be about Peter Parker, Mary Jane, Green Goblin, and New York, so what would it be about? Let's take a look into the weird world of Japanese Spider-Man. In episode 1, we begin at the Yamashiro Astroarchaeological Laboratory, where the esteemed astroarchaeologist Dr. Hiroshi Yamashiro and his daughter Shinko detect what they assume to be a meteor hurtling toward Earth. We then cut to our hero, Takuya Yamashiro. He's a racist. I mean he's a racer. A racer is what I said. A racer. And he's clearly busy practicing, but then he suddenly stops when he hears a voice in his head calling out to him. Which is then interrupted by a giant spaceship that flies overhead, which starts careening toward the city. Oh my god, there's no fucking way. There is... Okay. Alright, that's fine. As it turns out, that was the meteor that Dr. Yamashiro had spotted. So the Yamashiro family and Takuya's friend Hitomi Sakuma, who was photographing him earlier, decided to go check it out. Well, except for Takuya, he's got a big race tomorrow. He's got to tune up his motorcycle. Vroom, vroom, vroom. He's got to practice. Surely nothing will go wrong. I mean, it's not like anyone else is looking for this dumb spaceship anyway. So this is Professor Monster. He's the head of the Iron Cross Army. He's an alien. And that's his main henchman, Amazonas. She's also an alien. Anyway, through their conversation, we find out that the mysterious spaceship is the one and only Marveler. That fled Earth 400 years ago. It seems this Marveler may be the one thing that can stop Professor Monster's eerily named Machine Bem and his quest for world domination. And so Professor Monster commands Amazonas to stop Dr. Yamashiro from finding Marveler at any cost. With the task of killing Dr. Yamashiro, Amazonas grabs a toy. She grabs a toy from the shelf and scurries off. Okay. Anyway. The night before his family sets out to find Marveler, Takuya starts to have a schizophrenic episode again, to which he bolts out of the house and starts screaming like a madman. Cut to the next day, and Takuya's father is leading his expedition into the forest. Amazonas, who had been following them, finally prepares to attack by putting her little toy on the ground, and whoa, it grows. Okay, that might be a problem. Before Takuya is able to set off and practice for his race, he hears the voice calling out to him again, informing him it is now the time for revenge. So he yeets his little brother off his bike and ventures off to find the source of the voice. I'm sure his brother has a ride home. While Takuya is on his way to the forest, the professor and his group are surprise attacked by the Iron Cross army. After being separated from the professor, Shinko and Hitomi run into Takuya. Shinko tells him that their father is in grave danger and that he needs to go find him. So Takuya hurries to his father's location, until... Unfortunately, by the time Takuya gets there, his father has been fatally wounded by Bokunryu, the toy-turned-horror from the Iron Cross army. In his father's final moments, he warns Takuya of a group who is secretly trying to invade Earth, and pleads that he stop them. The light fades from his father's eyes, and Takuya is left hopelessly alone. Interestingly enough, this emotional scene was one of the only scenes where the show's director actually told Takuya's actor Shinji Todo to improvise. Having recently lost his father, Todo spoke from the heart and channeled his rage and grief into the following performance. He has said that in this scene, he spoke as himself, not as Takuya, which honestly makes this loss just hit that much harder. Unfortunately, Takuya isn't given much time to grieve, as he is instantly jumped by a group of Ninder, which are the run-of-the-mill goons of the Iron Cross army. He puts up a fight, but is ultimately stabbed in the neck and falls down a deep cavern. As if completely unharmed, Takuya the Tank Yamashiro gets up. As Takuya reorients himself, he hears a familiar voice deep within the cavern. Here he meets the man who has been telepathically speaking to him this whole time. He reveals to Takuya that the people who killed his father were members of the Iron Cross Army, a group spearheaded by the evil Professor Monster. After this, Takuya finally collapses from the injuries he sustained, to which the mysterious man slaps a bracelet on the guy and injects him with a spider extract. Upon waking up, the mystery man reveals that his name is Garia, a man from planet Spider. His homeworld was destroyed by Professor Monster, so as the sole survivor, he followed him to Earth in his ship Marveler, seeking revenge. Unfortunately, he lost the battle, was trapped in this cave filled with poisonous spiders, and was forced to send Marveler out into space. Over the past 400 years, he has been waiting for someone, anyone, who could receive his telepathic signal. Gadio reveals to Takuya that after being given the spider extract, he now has the powers of Spider-Man. And then this happens.
Takuya はガリアによってスパイダーマンとしての能力を授けられた。ガリアは雲に姿を変え。
What? What? No, that fucking makes sense. Nah, that fucking makes
okay,
sense.
Oh no, that's great.
Are you kidding me?
Are you
fucking
okay? Oh, no, it's fine.
Come on. He's Spider. Okay. No. Planet Spider, everybody. Planet Spider. Fuck Planet Spider.
Just
breathe. Calm down. Okay. Alright. So, Gari is a spider now, and he starts to talk to Takuya. He informs him that the device on his arm is the spider bracelet, which he can use to call forth Marveler. This bracelet that literally says Spider-Man also carries in it the Spider Protector. Takuya puts on the Spider Protector and finally becomes Spider-Man. Now, this Spider-Man has a lot of the classic spider powers: superhuman strength, speed, wall crawling, and spider senses. He also has some variations, like how he swings using his patented spider string, which is essentially a rope made of hardened web fluid that can supposedly pull objects weighing more than 100 tons. He also has a net that he can use to trap multiple enemies at a time. By the way, when he's going up and down these buildings, that's a real person. Big ups to Hirofumi Koga, who was the stuntman for all of these scenes. I don't know if you guys caught this, but in the opening, there's a scene where Spider-Man is literally climbing the Tokyo Tower. This was apparently the first scene they ever filmed for the show, and since there was no safe way to do this at the time, Koga was told to climb up and back down with no rope or safety net. And he did it. Insane. But yeah, a lot of the stunts after this used clever camera tricks to hide the one rope they would attach to Koga as he was doing these stunts. Back in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot less laws and safety precautions on these film sets, so stunt coordinators were constantly putting their lives on the line to make these heroes move the way they do. I mean, look at this car chase. In this scene, everything was shot while moving, so Kaneda is really holding on to this car as it zooms around. As a safeguard to make sure he didn't fall off, the stunt coordinators attached him to a rope and then threaded the rope into the car through the window and wrapped it all around the interior. Another thing you may have noticed is that not only does this Spider-Man look like Spider-Man, but he moves like him too. This was a deliberate choice by Osamu Kaneda, the stunt coordinator. He wanted Spider-Man to move like a spider and would often ask Koga to stay low to the ground and replicate poses directly from the comics. To Kaneda, if he didn't move like that, he wouldn't be Spider-Man. Anyway, back to our origin story. Takuya uses his newfound powers to infiltrate the Iron Cross Army. Then he reveals himself in one of the most famous clips from the show.
Spiderman!
After this, we get plenty brilliant fight scenes between Spider-Man and the Ninder, including this spectacular scene. Like, what is the goal here? By the way, I love this stupid sound they play every time they flip. Like, why? Anyway, Amazonas has had enough. It's time for Spider-Man to fight the beast that killed his father, Boku no Ryu. After a small scuffle, Boku no Ryu grows into a huge kaiju, leaving Spider-Man with no choice but to call Marveler. As Marveler arrives, it shoots out Spider-Man's legendary car, GP7, which can also fly, and by the way, it shoots missiles, cause why not? After some aerial acrobatics, Spider-Man manages to get GP7 back to Marveler. Finally, in his spaceship, Takuya belts out the famed line.
Marveler! Change Leopardon!
Then we are treated with the glorious transformation of the first superhero mech in tokusatsu history. If you were a kid at the time this aired, this shit blew your mind. Not only was Spider-Man a cool hero in his own right, but he also had a giant transforming mech to beat up kaiju? That is just badass, man! Now on the same playing field, Takuya quickly draws out his ace in the hole, Sword Vigor. Using this sword, Leopardon and Boku no Ryu have an epic fight that... Jesus Christ, Takuya, you think you got him? Bro, you actually disintegrated him. Oh my god. And with that, episode 1 ends, and Spider-Man vows to protect Earth from the terrors of the Iron Cross Army, saving the day for now.
Spider-Man! Spider-Man!
So yeah, after this, the rest of the series follows a very similar Monster of the Week format. Something bad happens, Takuya investigates, fights some goons, monster get big, Leopardon, Sword Vigor, hooray. Of course, the show is much more entertaining than that, and I recommend watching it in its full glory, but that's the basic gist. Funny enough, every time that Takuya finishes off the Monster of the Week, you can still see the first monster he defeated before the explosion every single time. Why? Interestingly, there's been a rumor for a while now that the leopardon suit was stolen, leading to a heavy reliance on old footage. When asked directly about it, it was revealed in a recent interview by Gene Pelc and his son that this was simply not true. In fact, the suit was later repurposed into the main mech for Denshi Sentai Denjiman, and to be honest, I kinda see it. So what was the real reason they relied so heavily on recycled footage? Because money. You gotta remember, even with multiple sponsors, shows like this were on shoestring budgets at the time. I mean, all the suits you see are handmade. Multiple shots are reused every episode, all in an attempt to save money. I mean, when you think Spider-Man, you usually think of him in the middle of a city, but a lot of these fights happen in forests and remote locations. The reason being, it was simply too expensive to film in city locations, and no one really bats an eye when you start blowing up things in the middle of nowhere. Now, why does Spider-Man pilot a mech and have a car and have a bracelet that says Spider-Man? Money, baby! In a show with one protagonist, the toy companies sponsoring Spider-Man, Poppy and Bandai respectively, simply needed more products to sell to the children who were watching. Hell, no one had ever even tried putting a robot in a superhero show before. Would it even work? Yeah, it worked very well actually, very well. Spider-Man was a commercial success. People loved Spider-Man and his mech leopardon. The show ended up airing for 41 episodes and even had a movie. I mean, the success of Leopardon as a toy even prompted Toei to add a mech to the next show they made called Battle Fever J, another collaboration between Marvel, Gene Pelc, and Toei. Battle Fever J was the big return of the superhero team genre of tokusatsu, better known as Super Sentai, which is a genre that had all but died years prior with the death of Jack Denji Kitai, the sequel to the hit Himitsu Sentai Gorenger, which was one of the shows that inspired Gene Pelc to get into tokusatsu in the first place. Turns out a team of superheroes works great with a giant robot they all fight in. Now that last sentence may seem a little familiar. That's probably because that's exactly what Power Rangers is. In fact, Gene Pelc wrote an article where he proposed the exact idea of utilizing footage from the Super Sentai series in Japan and then filming scenes with American actors in order to create a hit show for an American audience for 1/3 of the price. He worked with Stan Lee to pitch this idea to American media companies, but at the time, no one wanted it. Later, this idea would become the basis for Haim Saban's Power Rangers, which did exactly what Gene's article had said was possible. Now, did Haim Saban steal that idea from Gene Pelc? It's possible. Gene claims that Margaret Losh, who was head of Marvel at the time, took his reel with her to Fox Kids and got Saban, who was famous for making music for Saturday cartoons at the time, to work with her. Haim Saban claims he got the idea when he was on a business trip in Japan. The timelines line up, but who really knows? So wow, Japanese Spider-Man was a big success that changed the landscape of Japanese tokusatsu and American media. I mean, they must have known. Actually, Spider-Man almost never saw the light of day. Marvel was very hands-off with anything Gene was doing in Japan. However, when the pilot had finished production, a group of Marvel execs came over to Japan to see how they were doing. They sat there for 24 minutes watching the episode that I went over earlier. After the pilot finished, the room was silent. The execs did not like what they had seen. "You've stayed in Japan too long," they said. "This wouldn't work. This isn't Spider-Man. Who's gonna watch this?" Gene thought he was finished. Years of work down the drain. All until someone stood up and started applauding. It was Stan Lee. He loved it. And upon receiving Stan's approval, immediately the other Marvel execs turned to Gene and said, "What a great idea. You've done a great job here. Oh, it's gonna be great." And great it was. It's truly amazing what the dedicated group of people who worked on Spider-Man were able to accomplish, given the restraints they had. Japanese Spider-Man ended up becoming a landmark show that helped evolve modern Sentai and Tokusatsu into what it is today, while also inspiring Western shows such as Power Rangers and Transformers. It's crazy to think that in an era where everyone loves to see different versions of their favorite heroes from across the multiverse, a random Japanese TV show from the 70s about Spider-Man actually did it first. Here's hoping we see Takuya Yamashiro again. Someday.